So now we're moving to supporting practices, and today we're going to talk about using effective methods to elicit frequent responses. This is Module 6, so here we go. So the first piece I want to talk about is how you support students by maximizing engagement. I'm going to define for you what it means to maximize engagement. In this module, you're going to learn about what it means to use supporting practices to maximize engagement. And then, specific to this module, we're going to focus on eliciting responses as one supporting practice that does maximize engagement. And then we're going to talk about using different ways to elicit responses that meet the goals of maintaining or checking accuracy of processing, matching the learning outcome you have for students, matching student ability to do that, doing it in a way, using a variety of response formats to do that as appropriate, and then maximizing student involvement. And we'll say more about what each of those things is. The goal is to give you a framework for everything we're going to talk about. So that brings us back to what we've been talking about in other parts of this course, which is the explicit instruction model, which I hope at this point you have a memory for what it looks like. So in your mind for a moment, think about what does the explicit instruction model look like. There are 3 parts to it. Pause the video for just a second, see if you can remember. Or maybe you're just like, I remember, so I'm just going to keep moving. Either way, here we go. Well, let me wait. Okay, here we go. So first, we have modeling, which involves, as we know, a clear explanation and plan examples to elaborate on the clear explanation. Then we have, of course, 2 kinds of practice. We have both guided and independent practice, and you select one or both of those depending on the kind of skill you're teaching students. And now we move into the thing we're going to focus on in Module 6, and after Module 6 and Module 7, the supporting practices. And these are effective methods to elicit frequent responses, providing immediate specific feedback, and maintaining a brisk pace. So these are supporting practices we use not just in modeling or practice, but as you can see, this goes across, meaning we do these things throughout. So here are those supporting practices again. And for this module, we're going to focus on one. We're going to focus on using effective methods to elicit responses. Before we get in specifically to that, I want to address that first objective we have, which is to understand what engagement is. Engagement in this example here has some, say with me, bells and say with me, whistles. Okay, so apologize for the bad pun or whatever. But the point here is that this is not what engagement is. So engagement is not just about shiny things that are fun and exciting, right? It's not a diamond ring, it's not a bell, it's not a whistle. It's different. So what do we mean then by engagement? Engagement is when students' cognitive effort is focused on processing lesson content. So let me break that down for you just for a second. So cognitive effort, meaning students are thinking about what you want them to think about. And what they're thinking about is processing the lesson content. So engagement is when students are basically involved in the learning very specifically. If students are engaged, that means that they're doing something that is really relevant to what you're teaching. And this is where we talk a lot about the problems teachers have where they do fun activities, but they're engaging, but that's not engagement unless they immediately support students in processing the lesson content. And that's an important distinction we want to make. The supporting practices in this framework are ways that you maximize engagement so students will actually learn what it is you want them to learn. If you don't use these supporting practices effectively, students, I guarantee you, will not be as engaged. And even though you have a great model and you have a clear explanation and you have good planned examples, you set up guided practice and independent practice, if you don't support it in the ways we're talking about here in this module, it won't work. It'll fall apart. Okay, and I'll say more about that a little bit later. So let's give a definition of what it means to elicit a response. So to elicit a response is a method to get students to, say with me, provide a response. Exactly, so that was a choral response I was asking you for there. So the method involves thinking about what it is you want students to do and then executing that. So here's an example of how this might work. In a context where we're in the middle of a lesson, here's what the teacher is thinking. I could stand over here like it's thought bubble. So I want all students to quickly show me they are processing content, and I'm going to hear elicit a choral response because I think That's the best way to show me the students are processing content and to do it quickly and to do it for all students. We'll come back to thinking about those pieces. But for now, I want you to pay attention to is that this is the method. I'm thinking of which method I want students to use. So then I execute it. It begins with a question or some kind of instruction to tell students what to do. In this case, I say the word is exhibit, and I say the question is, what's the word? To make that happen so that the students actually give me the core response, I say everyone, I pause, I gesture like this, and then it actually happens. And you saw a video of Dr. Anita Archer doing that earlier on. So my method here is to use these words to elicit the core response. My method is the core response. Here's how I execute that method. And then what I get is my response, which is my entire group of students saying all at the same time, exhibit. So this is my method to elicit a core response. Or, well, this is a method to elicit a response. In this case, it is a core response.